Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. We hope you enjoy this one. Let's begin. The familiar streets of my neighborhood blurred past as I drove home, my eyelids heavy after another grueling 36-hour shift. The weight of countless emergencies, life and death decisions, and the ever-present specter of human suffering clung to me like a second skin. But as I turned onto my street, a small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Soon, I'd be home with Sarah and Ethan, my anchors in the storm of chaos that was my job as a paramedic. I pulled into the driveway of our modest suburban home, noticing with mild curiosity that Sarah's car was parked haphazardly, as though she'd been in a hurry. Shrugging it off, I grabbed my duffel bag and made my way to the front door, already imagining the warmth of Sarah's embrace and the excitement in Ethan's eyes as he regaled me with tales of his latest adventures at school. The moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The house was wrapped in an unusual silence, devoid of the typical sounds of Sarah puttering in the kitchen or Ethan's animated chatter. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine as I called out, "Sarah? Ethan? I'm home!" No response. I dropped my bag by the door and made my way through the house, my paramedic's instincts on high alert. As I approached our bedroom, I heard a soft rustling sound. Pushing open the door, I found Sarah standing in front of an open suitcase, her back to me. "Sarah," I said, confusion coloring my voice. "What's going on?" She turned slowly, and the look in her eyes made my blood run cold. It was a mixture of determination, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps? "John," she said, her voice steady but devoid of warmth. "I didn't expect you home so early." I gestured to the suitcase. "Are you going somewhere? Is everything okay?" Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. "I'm leaving you, John. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore." The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the doorframe for support, certain I must have misheard her. What are you talking about?" "Sarah, if this is about my hours at work, we can figure something out. I can talk to the chief about." "It's not about your hours, John," she interrupted, her voice tinged with impatience. "Well, not entirely. I've met someone else. Someone who can be there for me, for us, in a way you never could." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Someone else? Who? How long has this been going on?" Sarah's eyes flickered away from mine, focusing on a point just over my shoulder. "It's Michael, Ethan's teacher." The name hit me like a physical blow. Michael, the charming, charismatic man I'd met at parent-teacher conferences. The one who always seemed to have a special smile for Sarah. As the implications of her words sank in, a horrifying thought struck me. "Ethan," I breathed. "Where's Ethan? What have you told him?" As if on cue, I heard the soft padding of small feet behind me. I turned to see my son, my little boy, standing in the hallway clutching his favorite stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear I'd won for him at a carnival last summer. His eyes were wide and confused, darting between Sarah and me. Sarah brushed past me, kneeling down in front of Ethan. "Sweetie, remember what we talked about? It's time to say goodbye to Daddy. We're going on an adventure with Mr. Michael, and soon you'll have a new daddy who can be there for you all the time." I watched in mute horror as she spoke those poisonous words to our son. Ethan's lower lip trembled, his small hands tightening around the teddy bear. "But I don't want a new daddy," he whispered. "I want my daddy." The sound of tires on gravel cut through the tense silence. Sarah stood, her face set in lines of grim determination. "That's Michael. We need to go." As she moved to grab her suitcase, I finally found my voice. "Sarah, stop. Think about what you're doing. If you walk out that door with our son, there's no coming back from this. Our marriage will be over." She paused, turning to face me one last time. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth and love I'd once seen reflected there. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We were done months ago. You were just too busy saving strangers to notice." With that parting shot, she grabbed Ethan's hand in her suitcase, pushing past me toward the front door. I followed, feeling as though I was moving through molasses, unable to process the speed at which my life was unraveling. As I stepped on the front porch, I saw a sleek black Mercedes idling in our driveway. Michael sat behind the wheel, his handsome face impassive as he watched Sarah load her suitcase into the trunk. The contrast between his luxury vehicle and our modest home was stark, a visual representation of everything I couldn't give Sarah. Ethan looked back at me, his small face crumpling as Sarah buckled him into the back seat. "Daddy," he called out, his voice small and scared. I took a step forward, my heart breaking. "It's okay, buddy. Everything's going to be okay. I love you." But Sarah was already closing the car door, cutting off Ethan's response. She didn't spare me a backward glance as she slid into the passenger seat. As the Mercedes pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Ethan's tear-stained face pressed against the window, his little hand waving goodbye. I stood there, rooted to the spot, long after the car had disappeared from view. The warm summer air felt oppressive, the cheerful chirping of birds a mockery of the devastation I felt. My world, my family, everything I'd worked so hard for, had just driven away in a stranger's car. Slowly, numbly, I made my way back into the house that no longer felt like a home. The silence that had seemed odd earlier now felt deafening. I walked through the rooms, noting the empty spaces where Sarah's things had been, the toys Ethan had left scattered on the living room floor. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. Sarah's cruel words echoed in my mind. "You were just too busy saving strangers to notice." Had I really been so blind, so caught up in my work that I'd missed the signs of my marriage falling apart? I thought of all the long shifts, the missed dinners, the school events I'd had to skip. I'd always believed Sarah understood the demands of my job, the importance of what I did. Had I been fooling myself all along? As the reality of my new situation began to sink in, a wave of anger washed over me. How dare she? How dare Sarah throw away our years together, our family, for some school teacher with a fancy car, and to take Ethan, to poison him against me? I stood abruptly, pacing the room as my mind raced. This couldn't be happening. There had to be something I could do, some way to fix this. But as the hours ticked by and the shadows lengthened across the room, the awful truth settled over me like a shroud. My wife had left me. She'd taken our son, and I was alone. The days following Sarah's departure passed in a blur of disbelief and mounting anger. I moved through my daily routines like a ghost, going through the motions without really engaging with the world around me. Every corner of the house held a memory, a painful reminder of what I'd lost. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of our home computer, staring at the screen with a growing sense of dread. I'd logged into our joint bank account, hoping to transfer some money to cover the upcoming mortgage payment. What I saw made my stomach lurch. The account was empty. I clicked through the transaction history, my heart pounding. There it was, a large withdrawal made the day before Sarah left. She'd cleaned us out, leaving me with nothing but bills and an empty house. "God damn it, Sarah," I muttered, slamming my fist on the desk. The financial betrayal felt like a fresh wound on top of the emotional devastation. How was I supposed to keep the house? To fight for custody of Ethan? The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm me. Work became both a refuge and a battleground. I threw myself into my shifts with a reckless intensity, eager for the distraction of emergencies and the adrenaline rush of saving lives. But even as I tried to lose myself in the job, Sarah's words haunted me. Had my dedication to my work really cost me my family? My partner, Lisa, started giving me concerned looks. I caught her watching me during calls, her brow furrowed as I snapped at dispatch or handled patients with less than my usual care. I knew I was slipping, but I couldn't seem to pull myself together. It all came to a head during a high-stakes resuscitation. We were working on a middle-aged man who collapsed at a local gym, his heart in V-fib. As I prepared to administer a dose of epinephrine, my mind wandered. I saw Sarah's face, cold and distant, as she told me she was leaving. I saw Ethan's tears as he was driven away. "John!" Lisa's sharp voice cut through my haze. "What are you doing? That's the wrong med." I looked down at my hands, horrified to realize I'd nearly given the patient amiodarone instead of API. The potential consequences of my mistake hit me like a bucket of ice water. I'd almost killed someone because I couldn't keep my personal life from bleeding into my work. After the call, Lisa cornered me in the ambulance bay. Her usually friendly face was set in hard lines, her eyes blazing. "What the hell is going on with you, John? You nearly killed that guy back there." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to brush off her concern with some glib excuse. But as I met her gaze, something inside me crumbled. Before I knew it, words were pouring out of me in a torrent. I told her everything. Sarah's betrayal, her leaving with Ethan, the emptied bank account. I spilled out all the anger and hurt and confusion I'd been bottling up for days. When I finally fell silent, I felt drained but somehow lighter. Lisa's expression had softened as I spoke. Now, she reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "Oh, John," she said softly. "I'm so sorry. What a mess." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Listen," she continued, her voice taking on a more businesslike tone. "I've been where you are. When my ex left me, I thought my world was ending. But you can't let this destroy you, John. You've got to fight back." I looked at her, a spark of something, hope maybe, igniting in my chest. "How?" I asked. Lisa's eyes gleamed with a hint of steel. "First things first, you need a lawyer. A good one. My cousin Marcus is a divorce attorney. They call him the Shark in legal circles. He'll make sure Sarah doesn't get away with what she's done." As Lisa spoke, laying out a plan of action, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of despair that had clouded my mind began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. Sarah might have blindsided me with her betrayal, but I wasn't going to roll over and let her destroy everything I'd worked for. "You're right," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I need to protect myself. And Ethan. I can't let Sarah and Michael win." Lisa nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. I'll give Marcus a call tonight. Set up a meeting for you." As we parted ways, heading back to our respective duties, I felt a surge of determination. Sarah thought she had beaten me, left me broken and alone. But she'd underestimated me. I was a fighter, a survivor. I'd faced down death countless times in my job, brought people back from the brink through sheer force of will. Now, I would channel that same determination into fighting for my future and for my son. Sarah and Michael had no idea what was coming for them. The law office of Marcus Delgado was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the sleek, modern space I'd expected, I found myself in a cluttered room that looked more like a war room than a place of legal counsel. Every available surface was covered with stacks of papers, legal tomes, and what appeared to be surveillance photos. Marcus himself was a far cry from the shark-like attorney I'd envisioned. He was a short, rotund man with thinning hair and thick glasses. But when he fixed his gaze on me, I saw the keen intelligence that had earned him his fearsome reputation. "So," he said, leaning back in his creaking chair, "you're John." Lisa filled me in on the basics. Cheating wife, kidnapped kid, emptied bank account. Sounds like a real piece of work, this Sarah. I nodded, my jaw clenching at the casual recitation of my personal tragedy. "That about sums it up. Can you help me?" Marcus grinned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Oh, I can do more than help you, John. I can make sure Sarah and her new boyfriend regret the day they ever crossed you." For the next hour, Marcus laid out a plan of attack that left me reeling. He spoke of gathering evidence, of financial forensics and character assassinations, all in a tone that suggested he was discussing nothing more serious than the weather. "First things first," he said. ticking off points on his stubby fingers. We need hard evidence of Sarah's infidelity and financial misconduct. I've got a PI I work with, best in the business. He'll dig up every skeleton in Sarah and Michael's closets. I hesitated, a twinge of conscience nagging at me. Is all this really necessary? I mean, I just want what's fair. I want Ethan back. Marcus fixed me with a hard stare. Listen, Yun. Sarah didn't play fair when she emptied your bank account and ran off with your kid. You want to win this? You need to be willing to fight dirty. His words struck a chord. I thought of Ethan, probably confused and scared, being told he had a new daddy. I thought of Sarah's cold eyes as she walked out on our life together. Something hardened inside me. Okay, I said, my voice steady. What do you need me to do? Marcus nodded approvingly. That's more like it. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into Marcus's plan with the same intensity one brought to my most critical emergency calls. I hired the PI Marcus recommended, a taciturn man named Frank who promised to uncover every dirty little secret Sarah and Michael were hiding. I installed a call recording app on my phone, documenting every interaction with Sarah. Each cold text, each clipped phone call about Ethan's schedule became ammunition in our arsenal. At Marcus's insistence, I created a detailed timeline of Sarah's betrayal, starting from the first time I'd noticed her acting distant, right up to the day she left. As I pieced it all together, I was shocked by how many warning signs I'd missed, too caught up in my work and my belief in our marriage to see the truth. Frank's reports started coming in, each one more damning than the last. Michael, it turned out, had a history of affairs with students' mothers at his previous schools. He'd left a trail of broken homes and devastated families in his wake, always moving on before the dust settled. This is gold, Marcus crowed when I showed him the report. We'll use this to destroy his credibility. No judge in their right mind would let a kid anywhere near this predator. As the evidence mounted, I found myself viewing my situation with an almost clinical detachment. I drew on my EMT training, compartmentalizing my emotions the way I did during difficult calls. This was just another emergency, I told myself. Another life to save, my own and Ethan's. But in the quiet moments, when the house felt too big and too empty, the pain would creep back in. I'd find myself staring at photos of happier times, wondering how we'd ended up here. In those moments, I'd remind myself of what was at stake. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, about making sure he had the stable, loving home he deserved. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents and PI reports, I had a moment of clarity. This wasn't just about getting even with Sarah. It was about justice. Justice for me, for Ethan, and for all the other families Michael had destroyed with his predatory behavior. I refused to be a victim, I muttered to myself, the words feeling like a vow. I would use every legal and ethical means at my disposal to reclaim my life and protect my son. Sarah and Michael had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I met with Frank, the PI, at a nondescript diner on the outskirts of town. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table to me, his face impassive. Got some interesting stuff here, he said, tapping the envelope. Your ex-wife's new boyfriend? He's got a pattern. Moves from school to school, always leaves a trail of broken homes behind him. But he's careful, covers his tracks well. I nodded, feeling a mix of vindication and disgust. Anything we can use? Frank's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Oh yeah, I've got testimonies from some of his previous victims. Women who were too scared or ashamed to come forward before. But now, they're ready to talk. As I listened to Frank detail his findings, I felt a surge of righteous anger. Michael wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a predator who had been allowed to operate unchecked for far too long. And Sarah, had she known about his history when she decided to leave with him, the thought made my blood boil. There's more, Frank continued, his voice low. I've been tracking their movements. They're struggling, John. Sarah's blown through most of the money she took from your account. Michael's having trouble finding work. Seems word of his proclivities is starting to spread. I absorbed this information, feeling satisfied. Good, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. They deserve to struggle after what they've done. Frank raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. Instead, he pulled out a small recording device. I've also got some audio you might want to hear. Caught a conversation between them outside their apartment. It's enlightening. He pressed play, and Sarah's voice filled the air between us. She sounded stressed, angry. This isn't what you promised me, Michael. You said we'd have a fresh start, a better life. But look at us. We're barely making ends meet, and Ethan cries for John every night. What have we done? Michael's response was cold, dismissive. Pull yourself together, Sarah. We knew it would be tough at first. Once I get a new teaching position, things will improve, and Ethan will adjust. Kids are resilient. The recording ended, and I sat back, a whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. Part of me ached at the thought of Ethan crying for me. Another part felt a savage pleasure at Sarah's obvious regret. But mostly, I felt more determined than ever to bring this whole house of cards crashing down around them. This is good, Frank, I said, my voice steady. Keep digging. I want to know everything. Their finances, their movements, their conversations. Anything we can use. As I left the diner, my mind was racing with possibilities. I had the evidence of Michael's past indiscretions. I had proof of Sarah's financial misconduct. And now, I had insight into the cracks already forming in their relationship. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. I've got some new information, I said when he answered. I think it's time we start making our moves. Marcus chuckled, the sound predatory even through the phone. Music to my ears, John. Come by the office this afternoon. We'll start plotting our endgame. As I hung up, I caught sight of my reflection in a store window. The man staring back at me was harder, more focused than the John of a few weeks ago. The bags under my eyes spoke of sleepless nights, but there was a fire in my gaze that hadn't been there before. I thought of Ethan, of the life we should have had together. I thought of Sarah's betrayal, of Michael's manipulations, and I made a silent promise to myself and to my son. With renewed purpose, I headed towards Marcus's office, ready to set our plan in motion. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting slanted shadows across the kitchen table where I sat, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on the manila folder before me, its contents a ticking time bomb waiting to be unleashed. Today was the day. After weeks of meticulous planning and evidence gathering, we were finally ready to strike. I glanced at the clock, knowing that across town, Sarah and Michael were about to have their comfortable little world turned upside down. The shrill ring of my cell phone cut through the silence. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. "It's done," he said without preamble when I answered. "Sarah and Michael have been served. Divorce papers, custody suit, the whole 9 yards. You should have seen their faces, John. Priceless." I allowed myself a grim smile. How did they react? Marcus chuckled, the sound predatory even through the phone. "Oh!" Sarah looked like she'd seen a ghost. All the color drained from her face. And Michael, he was sputtering, trying to act tough, but I could see the fear in his eyes. They know they're in for a fight. "Good," I said, feeling a surge of vindication. "Let them squirm. This is just the beginning." As I hung up, I couldn't help but remember the day Sarah left, how helpless I'd felt watching her drive away with our son. Now, the tables had turned. I was in control, and I intended to use every advantage at my disposal. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus, true to his shark nickname, moved with ruthless efficiency. He presented our evidence of Michael's pattern of misconduct to the school board, initiating an investigation that sent shockwaves through the community. I was in the ambulance, restocking supplies after a call, when Lisa stuck her head in, her eyes wide with excitement. "John, have you heard? They've suspended Michael from the school, pending investigation. It's all over the staff emails." I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral even as a wave of satisfaction washed over me. Good. It's about time someone looked into his behavior. Lisa studied me for a moment, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. "You're really going for the jugular, aren't you?" I met her gaze steadily. "They started this, Lisa. I'm just finishing it." As we'd anticipated, Sarah didn't take our aggressive moves lying down. She retaliated by trying to paint me as an absent, neglectful father. Her lawyer filed counter motions, citing my demanding work schedule and the long hours I spent away from home. "She's playing dirty. Marcus warned me during one of our strategy sessions. We need to counter this narrative and fast." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. What if we turn it around on her? My job might keep me busy, but at least I'm not the one who abandoned my family for an affair. Marcus grinned, his eyes gleaming. "Now you're thinking like a shark, John. I've got an idea." The next day, Marcus presented the court with a stack of character references, singing my praises. Colleagues spoke of my dedication and compassion. Patients I'd saved shared stories of my care and professionalism. Even the chief of my paramedic unit wrote a glowing letter, emphasizing how my work saved lives daily. The coup de grace was a statement from Ethan's previous teacher, detailing how involved I'd been in his education despite my work schedule. She described parent-teacher conferences I'd attended straight off shifts, school projects I'd helped with in the wee hours of the morning. Sarah's attempts to discredit me backfired spectacularly. The judge, clearly impressed by the outpouring of support, ordered a temporary shared custody arrangement. It wasn't the full custody I wanted, but it was a start. The first time I picked Ethan up under the new arrangement, my heart clenched at the sight of him. He seemed smaller somehow, his eyes wary as he approached me. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, kneeling down to his level. "I've missed you so much." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then launched himself into my arms. I held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. "I missed you too, Daddy," he whispered, his voice muffled against my shirt. As I buckled him into the car, I noticed his clothes seemed ill-fitting, hanging loosely on his frame. A pang of worry shot through me. What kind of care was he getting with Sarah and Michael? Over the next few visits, I began to notice more concerning signs. Ethan mentioned eating a lot of fast food. He seemed tired, listless. When I asked about his new home, he'd grow quiet, his eyes darting away. Each observation, each whispered confession from my son, I meticulously documented. Every detail added to the growing case file that would, I hoped, eventually bring Ethan home to me for good. As I tucked Ethan into bed one night, reading him his favorite story, I made a silent vow. I would win this battle, not just for myself, but for him. Sarah and Michael had no idea what was coming, but I did, and I was ready for war. The community center bustled with activity as I set up the last of the equipment for today's first aid class. Parents and kids milled about, an air of excitement palpable in the room. This program had been my brainchild, a way to give back to the community while subtly bolstering my image as a caring, involved father. "All right, everyone," I called out, clapping my hands to get their attention. "Let's get started. Today, we're going to learn about basic CPR." As I demonstrated chest compressions on a practice dummy, I caught sight of Mrs. Henderson, the PDA president, watching from the back of the room. She gave me an approving nod, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. My plan was working. Over the past few weeks, I'd thrown myself into community involvement, volunteering at Ethan's school, organizing these first aid classes, even coaching a youth soccer team. Each activity carefully chosen to showcase my dedication as a father and upstanding citizen. The contrast between my increased visibility and Sarah and Michael's growing isolation was stark. Rumors had begun to spread about Michael's suspension, whispers of scandal following in their wake. I didn't need to fan the flames. The community's gossip mill took care of that for me. After the class, as parents and kids filed out, Mrs. Henderson approached me. "That was wonderful, John," she said warmly. "The children are learning so much. It's a shame Sarah isn't here to see it." I allowed a flicker of carefully rehearsed sadness to cross my face. Yes, well, Sarah's made her choices. I'm just trying to do what's best for Ethan and our community. Mrs. Henderson patted my arm sympathetically. "You're doing a marvelous job, dear. We're all so impressed with how you're handling everything." As she walked away, I suppressed a smile. The court of public opinion was swinging decidedly in my favor. That evening, as I was preparing dinner for Ethan and myself, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I nearly dropped the spatula as I read the headline. "Local teacher suspended amid allegations of misconduct." The article didn't name Michael directly, but it didn't need to. Anyone with half a brain could connect the dots. I scrolled through the comments, noting the outrage, the calls for a full investigation. My anonymous tip to the local media had paid off beautifully. The story was spreading like wildfire, fanned by the winds of small-town curiosity and moral indignation. Over the next few days, the situation snowballed. More of Michael's victims came forward, emboldened by the media attention. Each new revelation was another nail in the coffin of his teaching career. I watched it all unfold with a detached fascination, like a scientist observing a particularly volatile experiment. Sarah and Michael's carefully constructed new life was crumbling before their eyes, and I hadn't had to lift a finger. The truth was doing all the work for me. One afternoon, as I was leaving the grocery store, I ran into Sarah's sister, Emily. She'd always been friendly to me, even after the split. Now, she looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot as she struggled to meet my eyes. "John," she said hesitantly, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about everything. We had no idea about Michael, I mean." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "It's been a difficult time for everyone, Emily, especially Ethan." She winced at the mention of my son. "How is he doing?" "As well as can be expected, given the circumstances," I replied, allowing a hint of concern to creep into my voice. "It's not easy for a child, having his world turned upside down like this." Emily's face crumpled with guilt. "I should have seen it earlier. We all should have. Sarah, she's not thinking clearly. This isn't like her." I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, the picture of magnanimity. "We all make mistakes, Emily. The important thing is recognizing them and making things right." As I walked away, I could feel Emily's eyes on my back. Another small victory in the larger war. Sarah's support system was crumbling, her friends and family beginning to see the truth of the situation. That night, as I sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, watching him sleep, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The community was turning, public opinion swaying decisively in my favor. Sarah and Michael were feeling the heat, their reputations in tatters. But as I brushed a lock of hair from Ethan's forehead, I reminded myself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. For me, for Ethan, and for all the others who had suffered because of Michael's predatory behavior. The numbers on the spreadsheet before me told a story of financial devastation. I leaned back in my chair, a grim smile playing at the corners of my mouth as Marcus laid out the fruits of our latest offensive. "We've got her dead to rights, John," he said, his voice thrumming with barely contained excitement. "The forensic accountant found everything. Large cash withdrawals, hidden accounts. Sarah's financial misconduct is clear as day." I nodded, feeling a surge of vindication. "And the lawsuit?" Marcus's grin widened. "Filed this morning. We're going after every penny she took, plus damages. And here's the kicker. We've managed to get her assets frozen pending the outcome." The implications of this move weren't lost on me. Without access to the money she'd stolen from our joint accounts, Sarah would be scrambling. And Michael, still unemployed thanks to the scandal we'd unleashed, wouldn't be able to help. How long before they start feeling the pinch? I asked, already envisioning the fallout. Marcus shrugged. Hard to say exactly, but I'd be surprised if they're not in serious trouble within a month. Legal fees alone will bleed them dry. As I left Marcus's office, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of me recoiled at the ruthlessness of what we were doing. But then I remembered Sarah's cold eyes as she walked out on our family, the pain in Ethan's voice when he spoke of his new home. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as Sarah and Michael's financial situation unraveled. My emergency services contacts proved invaluable, quietly spreading word of Michael's untrustworthiness and effectively sabotaging his job prospects. One evening, as I was leaving the station after a shift, I spotted Sarah across the street. She was leaving a fast food restaurant, still wearing the uniform. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw a flicker of desperation in hers before she quickly looked away. The sight should have brought me satisfaction, but instead, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. This was the woman I had loved, the mother of my child, reduced to working minimum wage jobs to make ends meet. But then I remembered Ethan's ill-fitting clothes, the sadness in his eyes when he spoke of his time with Sarah and Michael. My momentary sympathy evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of reality. Marcus's aggressive collection tactics continued to put pressure on the couple. Their credit scores plummeted, making it impossible for them to secure loans or even rent a decent apartment. I heard through the grapevine that they'd been forced to move to a shabby one-bedroom in a less than desirable part of town. It was late one night when my phone rang, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "John!" Her voice was thick with tears. "Please, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we call a truce?" I closed my eyes, memories of happier times threatening to overwhelm me. But then Sarah's cruel words from the day she left echoed in my mind. "Oh, honey, we were done months ago. You were just too busy saving strangers to notice." "No, Sarah," I said, my voice cold. "We can't. You made your choice. Now you're living with the consequences." As I hung up, I felt a surge of vindication. Sarah was finally experiencing the same financial insecurity she had so callously inflicted on me. The tables had turned, and justice was being served. Later that night, as I sat on the porch swing, nursing a beer and staring out into the darkness, I allowed myself to really feel the weight of what we'd accomplished. Sarah and Michael's new life was in shambles. Their reputations were ruined, their finances in tatters. They were experiencing the same fear and uncertainty they had so carelessly inflicted on me and Ethan. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, if the path of revenge I'd chosen was changing me into someone I didn't recognize. But then I thought of Ethan, of the stability and love I could provide him once this was all over. I thought of all the other families Michael had destroyed, all the lives upended by his predatory behavior. No, I decided, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, and I was seeing it through to the end. As I finished my beer and headed inside, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. I had struck a decisive blow. Sarah and Michael's dream of a new life together was crumbling, and I was the architect of their downfall. The final custody hearing was approaching, and I intended to use every weapon in my arsenal to ensure that Ethan came home where he belonged. Sarah and Michael had started this war, but I was going to finish it, and when the dust settled, I would be the one left standing with my son by my side. As I climbed into bed, my mind was already racing with plans for our next move. The courthouse loomed before me, its imposing facade a silent witness to the countless battles fought within its walls. Today, it would bear witness to mine. The final custody hearing had arrived, and I was prepared for war. As I climbed the steps, my mind raced through the events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the pain, the meticulous planning, and calculated strikes against Sarah and Michael. It all came down to this. Marcus met me at the entrance, his briefcase bulging with the fruits of our labor. "You ready for this, John?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. "Let's finish this." Inside, The courtroom buzzed with tension. I caught sight of Sarah and her lawyer huddled together, whispering furiously. She looked haggard, the strain of the past months etched into the lines of her face. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of something. Pity? But then I remembered Ethan's tearful face as she drove away with Michael. As the proceedings began, Marcus unleashed our comprehensive dossier. Page after damning page detailed Sarah's instability and neglect since leaving. Frequent moves, Ethan's declining grades, Sarah's inability to provide a stable home. It was all there in black and white. I watched the judge's face as she pored over the evidence, her brow furrowing deeper with each revelation. Sarah's lawyer attempted to object, but Marcus smoothly countered each protest. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she took the stand, I could see the desperation in her eyes. She launched into a tirade, painting me as vindictive and unfit for custody. Her wild accusations grew more outlandish with each passing moment. "He's obsessed," she cried, her voice rising hysterically. "He's turned the whole town against us. He's poisoning Ethan's mind." I maintained my composure, my face a mask of calm concern. Inside, however, I felt a surge of triumph. Sarah was digging her own grave with every word. Marcus rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, I'd like to present character witnesses for Mr. Williams." What followed was a parade of testimonials that made my heart swell with pride. Colleagues spoke of my dedication and professionalism. Patients I'd saved shared stories of my compassion. Even the chief of my paramedic unit testified to my unwavering commitment to both my job and my son. The coup de grace came when Ethan's current teacher took the stand. Her testimony about Ethan's declining performance and emotional state when in Sarah's care was damning. "When Ethan returns from visits with his mother, he's withdrawn and unfocused," she explained. "But after time with his father, he's engaged and thriving. The difference is stark." I glanced at Sarah and saw the moment she realized she was losing. Her face crumpled, and for a second, I saw a flash of the woman I'd once loved. But then her features hardened, and she leaned over to whisper urgently to her lawyer. The final nail in the coffin came from the court-appointed child psychologist. Her recommendation was clear and unequivocal. Full custody should be awarded to me based on her extensive evaluations. As the psychologist detailed her findings, Sarah's control finally snapped. She leapt to her feet, her face contorted with rage and despair. "This is all lies," she screamed, pointing an accusing finger at me. "He's manipulated everyone. He's the one who should be on trial here." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mrs. Williams, control yourself or you'll be held in contempt." But Sarah was beyond reason. She continued her tirade, her words becoming increasingly incoherent as tears streamed down her face. I watched, a mix of emotions churning within me. Part of me wanted to go to her, to offer comfort as I had so many times in the past. But a larger part, the part that remembered her betrayal, that had fought tooth and nail to get to this moment, remained seated, impassive. The judge's voice cut through Sarah's sobs. "In light of the evidence presented in Mrs. Williams' erratic behavior, I have no choice but to grant full custody of Ethan Williams to his father, John Williams. Mrs. Williams will be allowed limited, supervised visitation rights, to be determined at a later date." The gavel fell with a final, decisive thud. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the decision wash over me. We'd done it. Ethan was coming home. As the courtroom erupted into motion around me, I felt Marcus clap me on the shoulder. "Congratulations, John. You've won." I nodded, unable to speak past a lump in my throat. Across the room, I saw Sarah crumple into her seat, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw a lifetime of shared memories, love, and now, irreparable loss reflected there. But then I thought of Ethan, of the stable home I could now provide him, and I turned away. The battle was over, and I had emerged victorious. As I left the courthouse, stepping into the bright sunlight, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in months. The war wasn't over, I knew there would be challenges ahead as Ethan and I adjusted to our new reality. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope for the future. I pulled out my phone, dialing the number for Ethan's school. It was time to bring my son home. The weeks following the custody hearing passed in a blur of activity. Ethan and I settled into a new routine, our bond growing stronger with each passing day. But even as I focused on rebuilding our life together, I couldn't help but keep tabs on Sarah and Michael's situation. It was a Tuesday evening when I received a call from Frank, the private investigator I'd hired months ago to track Sarah and Michael's movements. "John," Frank's gruff voice came through the line, "you might want to sit down for this." I sank into my armchair, a sense of foreboding washing over me. "What's happened?" Frank sighed heavily. "It's not good, John. Sarah's spiraling. Hard. She's barely leaving the house, and when she does, well, let's just say she's not in a good way." As Frank detailed his observations, I felt a complex mix of emotions churning within me. Part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, the love we'd once shared, ached for Sarah's pain. But another part, the part that had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and bitter custody battles, felt a grim satisfaction. "And Michael?" I asked, almost dreading the answer. "That's the other thing," Frank replied, his voice tight. "He's not handling the pressure well. I've overheard some pretty nasty arguments between them. He's becoming, well, verbally abusive, to put it mildly." I closed my eyes, processing this new information. How bad? Bad enough that the neighbors have noticed. I've heard talk of calling the cops if it doesn't calm down. After hanging up with Frank, I sat in the darkening living room, lost in thought. The sound of Ethan's laughter drifted down from upstairs, where he was playing with a new Lego set. The contrast between the warmth and security of our home and the chaos unfolding in Sarah and Michael's life was stark. Over the next few weeks, I continued to receive updates from Frank. Each report painted a bleaker picture. Sarah, depressed and increasingly unstable, barely functioning. Michael, resentful and angry, lashing out more frequently. One night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at me with worried eyes. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "is Mom okay?" I paused, carefully considering my words. "Your mom is going through a tough time right now, buddy, but she loves you very much, and she's trying to get better." Ethan nodded, his small face scrunched in concentration. "Can we help her?" His innocent question pierced my heart. I swallowed hard, fighting back a sudden wave of emotion. The best thing we can do is to keep loving her from afar and hope that she finds her way back to being the mom you remember. As I left Ethan's room, I found myself at a crossroads. The path of revenge I'd chosen had led me here. I had my son, my home, my life back on track. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't stand by and watch Sarah's life completely unravel, not when it would inevitably affect Ethan. I placed an anonymous call to the local police, reporting concerns about domestic disturbances at Sarah and Michael's address. It was a small act, but it felt like a turning point. I was no longer actively seeking to destroy Sarah and Michael's lives. Instead, I was taking a step back, allowing the natural consequences of their actions to unfold. A few days later, Frank called with news. "There was a police visit to Sarah and Michael's place last night," he reported. "Domestic disturbance call. No arrests, but it seems to have been the last straw for Sarah." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "She left John, packed a bag, and went to a women's shelter. From what I can gather, she's finally realized what a mistake she made with Michael." As I hung up the phone, I was struck by a wave of conflicting emotions. Relief that Sarah had finally removed herself from a toxic situation, a lingering anger at the pain she caused our family, and underneath it all, a small, quiet voice wondering if this might be the first step towards healing for all of us. That night, as I watched Ethan sleeping peacefully, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, the betrayal, the pain, the calculated moves and countermoves. I had won, yes. I thought of Sarah, alone in a shelter, her dreams of a new life with Michael shattered. I thought of Michael, now jobless and alone, his reputation in tatters. And I thought of myself, changed by the crucible of this experience in ways I was only beginning to understand. As I closed Ethan's door and headed to my own room, I made a silent vow. The war was over. It was time to focus on healing, for Ethan's sake and maybe in time for my own. Months had passed since the dust settled on the custody battle, and life had taken on a new rhythm. Ethan and I had fallen into a comfortable routine, our bond stronger than ever. The wounds of betrayal and conflict were slowly healing, replaced by the quiet joys of our daily life together. One sunny afternoon, I found myself in my boss's office, listening with growing excitement as he outlined a new opportunity. "John," he said, leaning forward across his desk, "we've been impressed with your performance, especially given everything you've been through. We'd like to offer you a promotion to paramedic supervisor." I blinked, momentarily stunned. Wow. "Thank you, sir. That's incredible." He smiled, pushing a folder towards me. "It comes with more stable hours, which I know will be good for you and Ethan. Take some time to look it over, but we'd love to have you step into the role." As I left his office, contract in hand, I felt a surge of optimism I hadn't experienced in years. This was a chance to provide even better for Ethan, to create the stable, loving home he deserved. That evening, as Ethan and I sat at the kitchen table, his homework spread out before us, I marveled at the change in him. Gone was the withdrawn, anxious child of the custody battle. In his place was a bright, engaged boy whose grades were steadily improving. "Hey, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "How would you feel about me working some different hours? I'd be home more in the evenings." Ethan's face lit up. "Really? That'd be awesome, Dad. We could have dinner together every night." His enthusiasm warmed my heart, reinforcing my decision to accept the promotion. As we bent our heads back over his math problems, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what I'd fought for, these simple, precious moments with my son. A few weeks later, as I was leaving the grocery store, I quite literally ran into Sarah. Our carts collided, and I looked up to apologize, only to find myself face to face with my ex-wife. "John," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, but there was a clarity in her gaze that I hadn't seen in a long time. "Sarah," I replied, nodding stiffly. "How are you?" She gave a small, sad smile. "I'm surviving, working at the diner on Fifth. It's not much, but it's a start." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The anger that had fueled me for so long had faded, leaving behind a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. "John," she said hesitantly, "I was wondering, I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to see Ethan, outside of the supervised visits. To really talk to him, try to make amends." I felt a reflexive surge of protectiveness. "I don't know, Sarah. Ethan's doing really well now. I don't want to disrupt that." Her face fell, but she nodded. "I understand. I miss him. I know I made a terrible mistake, and I'm trying to put my life back together. For him." As I looked at her, I saw not the woman who had betrayed me, but the mother of my child, a flawed, human woman who had made a devastating mistake and was now living with the consequences. "Let me think about it." I found myself saying, "I'll talk to Ethan's therapist, see what she thinks might be best for him." The gratitude in Sarah's eyes was almost painful to see. "Thank you, John. That's more than I deserve." That night, as Ethan and I sat on the porch swing, enjoying the warm evening air, I broached the subject of his mother. "Ethan," I said carefully, "how would you feel about spending a little more time with your mom, outside of the supervised visits?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Would she try to take me away again? My heart clenched at the fear in his voice. "No, buddy. You'd still live with me. This would just be a chance for you two to talk, maybe start rebuilding your relationship. He nodded slowly. I think I'd like that. I miss her sometimes. I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. I know you do, buddy. We'll take it slow, okay? Make sure everyone's comfortable. As Ethan drifted off to sleep that night, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the anger, the calculated moves and countermoves. It all seemed so distant now. The next morning, as I prepared breakfast, I made a decision. It was time for a fresh start, away from the ghosts of the past. I called my boss, accepting the promotion, and then started researching new cities where Ethan and I could begin the next chapter of our lives. As I packed up our belongings over the next few weeks, I found myself discarding the last remnants of my old life. The files detailing Sarah and Michael's downfall, the recordings of heated arguments, all of it went into the trash. It was time to close this chapter of our story. On our last night in the old house, Ethan and I sat on the front porch, much as we had on that evening when I first broached the subject of seeing Sarah more. "Are you excited about the move, buddy?" I asked, watching him swing his legs back and forth. He nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, it's going to be an adventure, right, Dad?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's right. A brand new start for both of us." As we sat there, watching the sun set on our old life, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The anger, the bitterness, the thirst for revenge. It had all faded, leaving behind a quiet determination to build a better future for my son and myself. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, Ethan and I loaded the last of our boxes into the moving truck. Our house, once a home filled with memories both bitter and sweet, now stood empty, a shell of its former self. "Ready for our new adventure, buddy?" I asked, kneeling down to Ethan's level. He nodded, his eyes bright with excitement and a hint of nervousness. "Yeah, Dad. But do you think Mom will be okay?" The question caught me off guard. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom is working on making herself better, Ethan. And even though we're moving, she'll still be a part of your life. We'll make sure of that." Ethan seemed satisfied with this answer, climbing into the passenger seat of our car. As I slid behind the wheel, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing across the street. Sarah. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I was transported back to happier times. The day we brought Ethan home from the hospital, our first night in this very house. But those memories were tinged with the pain of betrayal, the bitterness of our custody battle. As we drove out of town, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching our old life shrink into the distance. Ethan chatted excitedly about our new home, his school, the friends he hoped to make. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself smiling, truly smiling, for what felt like the first time in years. "Dad," Ethan said suddenly, his voice thoughtful, "are you sad about leaving?" I considered the question, realizing that my answer was important not just for Ethan, but for myself. "You know, buddy, I think I'm more excited than sad. We've been through a lot, you and me, but now we get to start fresh, make new memories, and that's pretty amazing, don't you think?" Ethan nodded vigorously. "Yeah, and maybe Mom can visit us sometime, when she's feeling better." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We'll see, buddy. One step at a time, okay?" As the miles rolled by, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal, the pain, the calculated revenge. It all seemed so distant now. I had won the battle for custody. Yes, but the real victory was in this moment. My son by my side, a future full of possibilities stretching out before us. I thought about Sarah, left behind to rebuild her life. About Michael, a cautionary tale of the consequences of one's actions. And about myself, changed in ways I was only beginning to understand. The path of revenge I'd chosen had brought me here, but it was time to leave that behind. The real challenge, the real adventure, lay ahead, building a new life, fostering Ethan's growth and perhaps, in time, finding a way to heal the wounds of the past. As we crossed the state line, a sign welcomed us to our new home. I felt a surge of hope, of possibility. This was more than just a physical journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. "Look, Ethan," I said, pointing to the sign. "We're here. Our new beginning." Ethan's face lit up with a smile that warmed my heart. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The past was behind us, and the future, our future, was bright with promise. As we drove into the sunset, towards our new home and new life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The war was over. The healing had begun, and for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to tomorrow with hope in my heart and love for my son as my guiding light. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.